The first sound that morning wasn't birdsong or the hum of sprinklers. It was metal snapping under pressure. Clang! The echo of bolt cutters biting through my heavy security chain rolled across the neighborhood like a gunshot. I had parked my Jeep in the driveway the night before, padlocked to a steel post. Not because I was afraid of thieves, but because I knew the HOA president had her eyes on me. And not just me, on everything I owned. Her name was Bethany Kensington Wright, though everyone called her Karen behind her back. She thrived on making the community miserable. Trash bins left out an extra 10 minutes? Fine. Garden gnomes in the wrong color? Fine. Grass half an inch too tall? Fine. She lived for control, and her kingdom was the HOA. But this time, she wasn't just overstepping. She was crossing a line that would destroy her life. I peeked through my blinds just in time to see her crouched at the base of my Jeep, those oversized bolt cutters gleaming in the morning sun. Her blonde bob swung forward as she strained, and then, snap. The lock clattered to the driveway, useless. She stood up, smug smile plastered across her face, brushing invisible dust from her floral cardigan. There, she muttered to herself. No one parks junk in my neighborhood. I felt my stomach twist. Not because of the Jeep itself, it looked like an ordinary black SUV to anyone else. But I knew better. That Jeep wasn't just my ride. It wasn't just sitting in my driveway for fun. It belonged to a police task force, on loan to me for operations I was helping with. Inside that junk car sat surveillance gear worth more than Karen's house. And now, she had her hands on it. I wanted to rush outside, to stop her, but I froze. This wasn't just about me anymore. If I blew my cover or exposed what was in that Jeep, months of work could collapse. So I waited, heart pounding, as she strutted around like a queen who had just conquered a kingdom. Within minutes, she had called a tow truck, the same company she always used to intimidate neighbors. The driver looked uncomfortable, but Karen waved HOA authority in his face until he complied. Chains hooked onto the Jeep's frame, hauling it away like some impounded junker. As the tow truck rumbled down the street, Karen followed in her Lexus, chin raised high. She thought she'd just taught me the lesson of a lifetime. But she had no idea. That single snap of steel had just transformed her from a petty suburban tyrant into a federal felon. And every neighbor who had ever suffered under her rule was about to watch her entire empire come crashing down. I didn't know it at that moment, but the sound of my lock hitting the ground was the sound of justice beginning. If you lived in our neighborhood for more than a week, you knew her name. Bethany Kensington Wright. Or as the rest of us quietly called her, Karen. To the outside world, she looked like the perfect suburban mom, pearls around her neck, floral blouses, a Lexus in the driveway, and a manicured lawn trimmed like a golf course. But inside the neighborhood, she was more like a dictator ruling with fines instead of weapons. She wasn't just the HOA president. She was the self-declared queen of our cul-de-sac kingdom. And like every tyrant, she loved to remind us who held the power. Her rules were endless and always shifting. If you didn't mow your lawn by 7 a.m. sharp on Saturdays, you got a notice taped to your door. If your kid left a bike leaning against the garage, you got a $50 fine. If your dog barked twice in the same hour, you'd receive a warning letter that looked like it had been drafted by a Supreme Court clerk. But it wasn't about keeping the neighborhood beautiful. It was about control. Karen loved the feeling of watching grown adults squirm as she lectured them about standards. She loved waving her clipboard like it was a royal scepter. And most of all, she loved the fear in people's eyes when they realized she actually enjoyed ruining their weekends with one petty notice after another. People tried to fight back, of course. Some neighbors complained. Some appealed. Some even banded together to petition against her. But Karen always found a way to win. She had connections. Her husband, Carl, sat on the city council. And she had money. Years of embezzling HOA fees into maintenance projects that never happened had padded her pockets. But more than that, she had ego. She believed she was untouchable. And that's why my Jeep had caught her attention. To her, it wasn't just a car parked in a driveway. It was a challenge. A chance to show the neighborhood, once again, that she made the rules, and no one could defy her authority. That's why she didn't hesitate to haul out bolt cutters at sunrise like some kind of suburban vigilante. That's why she smiled when the lock fell, as if she had personally defeated an enemy of the state. For Karen, it wasn't about the Jeep being a violation. It was about her being able to point at me in the next HOA meeting and say, "See? Even he can't get away with breaking the rules." She craved that spotlight. She needed it like oxygen. But here's the thing about power-hungry people like her, they never know when they've gone too far. Karen thought cutting my lock would be just another victory, another notch on her clipboard. She thought she'd humiliate me in front of everyone. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that this wasn't about me anymore. She had just stolen something she could never cover up, never find her way out of, never bully into silence. She thought she was still the queen. But her empire had already started to crumble. To anyone else, my black Jeep looked ordinary. A little dusty from the road, a little intimidating with its tinted windows, but nothing special. Just another SUV in another suburban driveway. That illusion was deliberate. What Karen didn't know, what no one in the neighborhood could know, was that the Jeep wasn't really mine. It was on loan from a federal task force I'd been working with. Inside that junk car was more than leather seats and cup holders. The back compartment held state-of-the-art surveillance gear, encrypted radios, hidden dash cameras, GPS scramblers, and a laptop hardwired into police servers. To the untrained eye, it was just a vehicle. But to the task force, it was a mobile command unit worth more than Karen's entire HOA budget for the year. That's why I had chained it to a steel post in the first place. Not because I was scared of thieves, no common thief would bother. But because I knew Karen. I knew her ego. And I knew eventually she'd take the bait. Still, when I saw the tow truck hauling it away under her smug supervision, my chest tightened. Not from fear, but from calculation. The Jeep had 2 silent alarms built into it, one triggered if the lock was tampered with, and another if the vehicle was moved without clearance. By now, those signals would already be pinging on a federal dashboard across town. Somewhere, in a secure office, a team of agents was staring at a blinking red dot labeled, "Unauthorized Relocation." I could almost picture their faces. Confusion. Urgency. Phones ringing. A supervisor shouting orders. And meanwhile, Karen was smugly tailing a tow truck down the road, convinced she had just scored another petty victory for her suburban empire. She thought she was teaching me a lesson. She thought she was humiliating me. But in reality, she had just stolen a federal asset. And the consequences of that were going to be explosive. The Jeep wasn't just a surveillance unit, it was tied to an ongoing investigation. For months, the task force had been tracking a local smuggling ring, and every shred of data was being funneled through that vehicle. If even one piece of equipment went missing, or worse, if Karen accidentally tampered with the files, she wouldn't just be guilty of trespassing. She'd be guilty of obstruction of justice. A federal crime. And here was the kicker, the agents weren't going to come knocking politely. They weren't going to send her a warning letter like she sent to neighbors about trash bins. No, when the task force came, it would be with badges, warrants, and handcuffs. As I stood by my window, heart still hammering, I realized something chilling. I didn't need to stop Karen. I didn't need to fight her. All I had to do was let her keep digging her own grave. The bolt cutters had been the first shovel full of dirt. The tow truck was the second. And when the task force arrived, she'd be buried under the weight of her own arrogance. The Jeep wasn't just a car. It was a trap. And Karen had just walked straight into it. Tow yards always feel the same, dusty, greasy, and humming with the low growl of engines being shuffled around like chess pieces. But that morning, when Karen strutted in behind the truck that carried her prize, she treated the place like it was her coronation. The driver hopped out, paperwork in hand, and looked at me one last time with a shrug. He didn't know what he'd just dragged into his lot. He didn't know that he was parking something hotter than a stick of dynamite in the middle of his own business. Karen, of course, had no clue either. She adjusted her pearls, planted her high heels on the cracked asphalt, and barked orders like she owned the place. Yes, park it there. No, not in the shade. It needs to be visible. People need to see consequences. Consequences. That word hung in the air like smoke. The Jeep rolled into a corner of the lot, its chain now replaced with the tow company's flimsy metal lock. Karen stood back with folded arms, smiling, as if she had just captured a wild beast and put it in a cage. What she didn't see, what none of them saw, was the blinking green light on the dashboard. It had been silent while parked in my driveway, but once the Jeep was moved, the system kicked into full alert. Inside, the surveillance unit was quietly transmitting location data, recording audio, and sending it directly back to the federal servers. By now, agents were watching everything. Karen, preening in the sun, was live-streaming her own crime straight to law enforcement. The tow yard manager, a sweaty man named Gus, finally walked over with his clipboard. He gave Karen a puzzled look. "Ma'am, are you sure this belongs here? Usually HOAs don't bring in vehicles like this without documentation." Karen scoffed, waving her hand like she was dismissing a servant. "Don't worry about that. I'm the HOA President. I make the documentation. This vehicle was in violation. It stays until I say otherwise." Gus frowned, scratching his head. "Looks like government plates to me." Karen leaned in, lowering her voice, but not nearly enough. "That's just to make it look official. Trust me, it's just a prop. He thinks he's special, but rules are rules." What Karen didn't realize was that Gus's lot had security cameras everywhere. Every word, every smug gesture, every illegal order she gave was being recorded from half a dozen angles. And when combined with the Jeep's internal surveillance, it was the kind of airtight evidence prosecutors dream of. Meanwhile, I stayed back, watching quietly. This was no longer my battle, it was hers. She was building the case against herself, one arrogant command at a time. But the clock was ticking. Federal alerts don't stay ignored for long. Somewhere across town, black SUVs were already being fueled up, their engines rumbling, waiting for the word to roll out. Karen thought she was victorious. She thought she had caged my Jeep. But in reality, she had just walked into the tow yard that was about to become her prison cell. My phone buzzed at 9:13 a.m., a number I didn't recognize, but one I knew better than to ignore. The caller ID read, "Restricted." I stepped away from the window, heart steady now, and answered. "This is Agent Morales, Department of Homeland Security. We're tracking movement on Asset 47. Can you confirm?" Asset 47. That was the Jeep's code name. Cold, clinical, detached. To me, it was just a cover car. To them, it was a $1 million mobile unit loaded with intel. I took a slow breath. Confirmed. HOA interference. Local tow yard. They think it's a civilian seizure. A pause. Then the agent's voice sharpened. Civilian interference? With government property? Do you have visual? I glanced out again. The tow yard was only 2 blocks down the street. From my upstairs window, I could still see the Jeep parked in the corner like a black beast in chains. Karen stood proudly nearby, arms crossed, chatting with Gus as if she were negotiating a real estate deal. "Affirmative," I said. HOA President initiated it. Used bolt cutters. Directed the tow herself. Vehicle is secured in public lot. Surveillance system still active. There was silence on the line. Then the sound of muffled voices, agents conferring, papers being shuffled. When Morales spoke again, his tone was ice. "That vehicle contains live case data. If compromised, it's obstruction of a federal investigation. We're dispatching units now." Dispatching units. That meant black SUVs, flashing badges, federal warrants. But Morales wasn't done. We need you to maintain eyes on the target until we arrive. Do not engage. Do not warn them. Copy? I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Copy. Target is oblivious. Karen, meanwhile, was still lecturing Gus about neighborhood standards. She didn't even notice that she was being watched not just by me, but by half a dozen federal analysts glued to live feeds streaming from the Jeep itself. Every smug flick of her wrist, every command, every arrogant word was becoming evidence in a case that was now far bigger than HOA nonsense. Morales' voice came one last time before the line cut out. We'll take it from here. Stay clear. By the end of today, that woman won't just be a neighborhood problem, she'll be a federal defendant. Click. The call ended. I stared down at the tow yard, the reality settling in. For months, Karen had ruled the neighborhood with petty threats and fines. She thought she was untouchable. She thought no one could fight back. But the difference this time was simple. She hadn't just picked a fight with me. She had picked a fight with the United States government. And they weren't going to send warning letters. They were going to send agents. I leaned back against the wall, a slow grin forming. For the first time since this HOA war began, I didn't feel like the underdog. Karen thought she'd finally won. But the real game had only just begun. By 10 a.m., the tow yard looked less like a business and more like Karen's personal stage. She had found a folding chair, plopped it down near the Jeep, and sat there sipping a latte like a queen overseeing her conquered territory. Every time someone walked past, she waved her manicured hand dramatically. That vehicle? Oh, yes, it was illegally parked. I had it seized. That's what happens when people ignore my rules. She said it loudly, making sure everyone heard. Gus, the tow yard manager, had started to regret letting her in at all. He kept shifting nervously, looking at the Jeep like it was a ticking time bomb. Which, in a way, it was. Ma'am, he tried again, I really don't think this is standard procedure. I mean, those plates. Karen snapped her fingers at him. Do I look like someone who doesn't know the law? I'm the HOA President. I practically am the law around here. Now quit fussing and make sure nobody touches my property. Her property. She had actually started calling the Jeep hers. Meanwhile, across town, black SUVs were already moving. But Karen had no idea. She thought she was untouchable, invincible, immune to consequences. And that arrogance pushed her into making the biggest mistake yet. Around 10:20, Karen pulled out her phone and began recording herself, panning the camera across the Jeep. This is what happens when you break HOA rules, she announced proudly, posting it straight to her neighborhood Facebook group. No exceptions. No excuses. Even military wannabes get put in their place. I don't care if it has government plates, it's not above me. Those words didn't just hit Facebook. Within minutes, screenshots spread like wildfire. Neighbors whispered, outraged, horrified. Some even laughed, knowing Karen had finally gone too far. And then, the video slipped beyond the neighborhood. Someone forwarded it. Then someone else. By 10:45, that little clip had landed in the inbox of federal investigators already en route. Karen had just provided video evidence of herself openly confessing to tampering with federal property. But she wasn't done. She strutted up to the Jeep, heels clacking against the pavement, and yanked at the tow lock for emphasis. See? Secured. Nobody's taking this back without going through me. What she didn't notice was that the Jeep's dash cam, still very much active, was zoomed directly on her smug face, capturing every reckless word. Gus looked like he wanted to crawl under a car. He muttered, "Lady, you're playing with fire." Karen just smirked. Fire? Please. I am the fire. She didn't know it yet, but her flame was about to be snuffed out. Because 3 blocks away, I could already hear it, the low rumble of engines, steady, powerful, and growing louder. Not tow trucks this time. Not neighbors. Federal SUVs. Karen was still posing for Facebook likes when her reckoning was about to arrive. The first thing I noticed was the silence before the storm. The tow yard, usually filled with clanks of chains and the hum of engines, suddenly went quiet, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Then, at exactly 11:02 a.m., the sound came. Low. Heavy. Powerful. Engines. 3 black SUVs rolled into the street, windows tinted, chrome grills gleaming in the sun. They didn't rush. They didn't honk. They simply arrived, like predators circling prey. Karen, oblivious as ever, was too busy posing with her phone to notice. She was filming herself again, waiting her latte at the Jeep. This is what authority looks like. Don't ever question me again. The SUVs turned into the tow yard in perfect formation. Their doors opened almost in unison. Men and women in suits and tactical vests stepped out, badges flashing like steel under sunlight. DHS, FBI, and local PD task force, an entire alphabet soup of authority. The lead agent, tall, calm, radiating quiet danger, strode forward. His badge glinted as he spoke. Step away from the vehicle. Karen spun around, half annoyed, half indignant. Excuse me? Who do you think you are barging in here? This is an HOA matter. I had this vehicle impounded legally. The agent didn't flinch. He didn't even raise his voice. Ma'am, that vehicle is federal property. By cutting its lock and directing its seizure, you've committed multiple federal offenses, including tampering with an active investigation. Her jaw dropped. She blinked twice, then forced out a laugh. You can't be serious. Federal property? Don't be ridiculous. This is just some oversized Jeep parked where it shouldn't have been. I don't care what stickers or plates it has. The HOA rules still apply. The agent raised a hand, and instantly, 2 tactical officers flanked her. One of them calmly removed the phone from her grip. The Facebook live stream ended mid-sentence, leaving her HOA followers in shocked silence. Karen shrieked, "You can't do this. Do you even know who I am?" The agent tilted his head slightly, his tone dry as desert sand. Yes. And that's why you're not in handcuffs yet. Step aside. Karen froze, sputtering. She wasn't used to being challenged, much less dismissed. Gus, meanwhile, looked like he had just aged 10 years. He muttered under his breath, "Told you this was fire." 2 more agents moved to the Jeep, unlocking its tow restraints with practiced precision. Within minutes, the vehicle was free, engine humming to life. Its lights flickered once, as if it were awake again after being insulted by captivity. Karen tried one last time, her voice shrill, echoing across the lot. "You can't just take it. That's against HOA law. I'm the president, and I..." But her words were cut off by the roar of the Jeep's engine as it pulled forward, escorted by federal SUVs. For the first time in her reign of HOA terror, Karen didn't look powerful. She looked small. And for the first time, I realized, this wasn't just neighborhood drama anymore. This was federal. Karen had stepped into a battlefield she couldn't control. If there was one thing Karen loved more than lattes and HOA power, it was the sound of her own voice. And she wasn't about to let federal agents walking off with the Jeep silence her. The moment the task force pulled out of the tow yard, she spun on her heels and stormed after them, heels clacking like gunfire on the pavement. "Stop! You can't just take that vehicle. I'll have you all in court by the end of the week." The lead agent paused just long enough to glance back, eyebrow raised, before sliding into the SUV. But Karen wasn't done. She planted herself in front of the last vehicle, blocking its path with her arms stretched wide like some suburban martyr. "You want to drive past me? Fine. But it's going to cost you everything in a lawsuit. Do you understand? I am the HOA president. I have legal authority here." Gus, standing off to the side, groaned and muttered, "Lady, you're digging your own grave." Karen whipped around. "Excuse me? Grave? Hardly. I know my rights. These people don't scare me. She yanked her phone back out and started dictating a post for the neighborhood Facebook page. Federal thugs just assaulted me and stole an HOAC's vehicle. I will be filing charges of harassment, theft, and intimidation. Every single one of these so-called agents will regret this. HOA law outranks their nonsense. The absurdity of that last sentence was enough to make Gus choke on his cigarette. HOA law outranks federal law? But Karen believed it. Worse, she said it on camera. Because not only was she still recording herself, several bystanders at the tow yard had whipped out their own phones too. Within minutes, her delusional ranting was all over social media. And by the time federal headquarters got wind of it, Karen had crossed a new line. At 12:15 p.m., while pacing her kitchen like a general preparing for war, she called a lawyer. Except, instead of calmly explaining the situation, she screamed into the phone about government agents stealing HOA property and the neighborhood's sovereign right to regulate military vehicles. The lawyer lasted all of 3 minutes before hanging up. That didn't stop her. She began firing off emails to the mayor's office, to the county courthouse, even to a senator's staffer. Each message more hysterical than the last, filled with threats of lawsuits, fines, and neighborhood tribunals. But here's the problem, she wasn't just sending empty threats anymore. She was writing everything down, creating a paper trail of evidence showing intent, defiance, and obstruction. The feds didn't need to build a case against her. She was handing them one, piece by piece, with every manic email and Facebook post. By 2 p.m., Karen was back at the tow yard demanding Gus reimburse the HOA for lost revenue. By 4 p.m., screenshots of her messages were circulating among federal prosecutors. And by 6 p.m., a sealed warrant had already been signed. Karen thought she was preparing to win a legal battle. In reality, she was preparing to walk straight into a federal trap. The sun had barely set when the quiet hum of suburbia was shattered. Dinner plates clinked inside homes, sprinklers ticked across manicured lawns, and then, suddenly, the sound of heavy tires crunching on asphalt silenced everything. At 7:43 p.m., 4 unmarked SUVs slid into position outside Karen's cul-de-sac. Their headlights cut through the dusk like spotlights on a stage. Curtains twitched. Neighbors peeked out, phones in hand, sensing the spectacle before it even began. Karen's house, painted that smug shade of HOA beige, stood at the center, porch light glowing like a false beacon of authority. She was inside, typing furiously on her laptop, drafting what she proudly titled Cease and Desist to the federal government. She didn't notice the convoy until the pounding on her door rattled the entire frame. Bam, bam, bam. Federal agents. Open the door! Karen froze, latte halfway to her lips. For a full 3 seconds, she looked around her spotless living room as if expecting backup from the HOA board. Then she set the cup down, straightened her cardigan, and muttered, "They wouldn't dare." They dared. When she didn't respond, the battering ram swung. The door flew inward, splintering against the wall. Tactical boots thundered in. Red and blue lights flared outside, painting her pristine white curtains in chaos. "Ma'am, hands where we can see them!" Karen shrieked, clutching her pearl necklace like a villain from a bad soap opera. "This is illegal. You can't come in here without my permission. I'm the HOA President." The lead agent, the same one from the tow yard, stepped forward with calm precision. He held out the sealed warrant. "Actually, ma'am, we can. And we are." Karen lunged for her laptop, screaming, "You have no jurisdiction." But 2 agents intercepted her, snapping cuffs onto her wrists before she could even finish the sentence. The clink of steel echoed through her granite kitchen like justice itself. Neighbors flooded their lawns, filming the scene with wide eyes and shaky hands. For years, they had endured her fines, threats, and endless violations. Now they watched her being marched down her own driveway, robe slipping, hair frizzed, voice hoarse from screeching. One neighbor whispered, "About time." Another muttered, "Poetic justice." Karen twisted against her restraints, still bellowing. "You're all finished. I'll sue every last one of you. HOA law is supreme. HOA law." But her words were swallowed by the roar of an idling SUV. The agents pushed her inside, slammed the door, and in less than 60 seconds, the convoy rolled out, leaving the neighborhood in stunned silence. On her porch, the broken door swayed like a monument to her downfall. Inside her house, stacks of files, emails, and printouts lay waiting, the evidence she had written herself. And across town, federal prosecutors were already drafting charges. Karen thought she was untouchable. That night, the HOA Queen of the cul-de-sac became a federal prisoner in less time than it took her to finish a latte. The courthouse smelled faintly of polished oak and cold justice. Rows of benches filled with curious neighbors, local reporters, and even a few smirking ex-HOA victims who had shown up early just to get front-row seats. Everyone wanted to see the Queen of Fines and Bylaws finally face a law she couldn't twist. At the defense table sat Karen, no longer in her power blazer or HOA-issued badge, but in a plain beige suit that did nothing to hide the deep bags under her eyes. She looked smaller than ever, shackled not by iron this time, but by reality. When the judge entered, the room rose. Karen didn't. She muttered something about sovereignty and my authority outranks his. The bailiff leaned over and whispered sharply, "Stand up." She did, reluctantly, lips pursed like a child forced to eat broccoli. The prosecutor wasted no time. "Your Honor," he began, voice sharp and steady, "this is not a case of misunderstanding or civil overreach. This is a case of willful obstruction, vandalism of government property, theft, threats, and repeated attempts to undermine federal authority. The defendant, Mrs. Bethany Kensington Wright." Karen slammed a hand on the table. "That's President Wright. HOA President." The judge's gavel cracked down like thunder. "Mrs. Wright, one more outburst and you'll be held in contempt." Gasps rippled through the room. Karen leaned back, red-faced but quiet, for the moment. The prosecutor continued, laying out the chain of evidence. Video of Karen cutting the lock. Footage of her blocking agents at the tow yard. Screenshots of her unhinged Facebook posts about HOA law outranking federal law. Dozens of emails to government officials threatening neighborhood tribunals. Each piece stacked like bricks in a wall she could never climb. Then came the witnesses. Gus, the tow yard manager, took the stand first. He scratched his beard and testified with a calm, gravelly voice. She walked in like she owned the place, waving her phone around, cutting locks like she was doing us a favor. "I told her she'd regret it. Guess I was right." The gallery chuckled. The judge glared them into silence. Next came the lead federal agent. He described the Jeep, its tactical modifications, the classified equipment, its connection to ongoing operations. He spoke in clipped, professional sentences. Each word dug Karen deeper. When it was her turn, Karen rose for her defense with the confidence of someone who thought she was auditioning for a courtroom drama. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, sweeping her hands dramatically, "what we have here is a case of federal bullying. I am the president of my community. I was elected. That Jeep violated HOA standards. I was simply enforcing the rules. Rules matter." The jury sat stone-faced. The prosecutor smirked. She went on, growing more frantic. "HOA law is law. It outranks their pretend badges. Without us, there would be chaos, I tell you." Her lawyer sank lower in his chair. By the time she sat down, sweaty and wild-eyed, the courtroom knew her fate was sealed. The judge took a long, deliberate pause before delivering the sentence. "Mrs. Wright, this court does not recognize HOA bylaws as superior to the laws of the United States. Your repeated obstruction, destruction of government property, and harassment of federal officers is not only unlawful, it is dangerous. Therefore, I sentence you to 8 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole for the first 3. The gavel dropped. Karen screamed, "You can't do this. I am the law, as deputies dragged her out, her voice echoing against marble walls until it vanished. Outside, neighbors gathered around reporters, whispering in disbelief and satisfaction. For the first time in years, the cul-de-sac felt free. And somewhere in an evidence locker sat the Jeep, untouched, unbroken, and still very much not hers. The reign of HOA Karen was officially over.